Everything you know about money is a lie. You walk into a bank, deposit your life savings thinking they'll keep it safe, but you're wrong. You've been lied to because of one reason: economic growth. The more you believe in this financial lie, the more you're willing to deposit, the more you're willing to borrow, the more you're willing to spend, and the more the economy grows. But what if you learn the truth? Before I show you what really goes on with your money behind closed doors, we need to first go over two theories that society and academia taught you for centuries that try to explain how banks and our money system functions. Notice I said theories because no one actually knows with certainty how any of this works, and no experiment or study has ever been conducted to find out until 2014 by this man. Okay, first, the financial intermediation theory, which you might have heard of before. This theory simply states that banks act only as a middleman, collecting savings in the form of deposits that are then lent out to willing borrowers. So let's say you need to borrow $100,000 to buy a magic lamp. You could try to find an individual or a friend who will lend you the money, but it'll be challenging with trust issues, liquidity, reliability. So instead, you can go to a bank, an intermediary, to borrow the amount of money from them. Now we're assuming that the bank has $100,000 to lend out in this scenario because it collected enough deposits from the people. Essentially, with this theory, banks are just a giant piggy bank where some people can deposit and some people can borrow the money. But if that's the case, why is finance such a lucrative industry? If they're just an intermediary, why is the industry worth tens of trillions of dollars? Second is the fractional reserve theory, or money multiplier. And here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you were just plopped into a brand new economy and you go to your local bank to deposit $1,000. Congratulations, your local bank now has $1,000 in its bank system. Now, for the bank to make money, it wants to lend this amount out to collect interest payments, but it can't lend out the entire $1,000 because there is a rule that says the local bank is required to keep 10% of your deposits in reserves in case something happens, meaning the bank can only lend up to 90% of your deposits, or $900. Now, let's say John walks into the bank and borrows the $900. If we look at the bank system, here's what it'll show. You have $1,000 with the bank and John has $900, meaning the bank system has a total of $1,900 recorded. If John spends the $900 he borrowed on a $900 magic lamp, and then the magic lamp seller takes the $900 and deposits it into the same local bank, that means the bank can again loan out $810, or 90% of the $900 deposit. And now, if we look at the bank system again, here's what it'll show. You still have $1,000 in your account, the magic lamp seller has $900 in his account, and the bank has $810 available to lend out to someone. Meaning the system now has $2,710, all from your initial $1,000 deposit. And this money multiplier cycle will go on fueling the economy over and over and over again until the original $1,000 deposit turns into approximately $10,000 in the bank system as people borrow and deposit money. This is the fractional reserve theory in a nutshell. The $10,000 is calculated with an economically accepted formula called the money multiplier formula of 1 over the reserve ratio. And in this example, it was 10%. But hold on. Didn't the Federal Reserve Board in 2020 slash reserve requirements to 0 for all depository institutions? But remember, there's still one more monetary theory that has been buried for decades that will change how you look at the entire financial world forever and make you wonder why society and academia aren't talking about this. The credit creation theory explains that every bank, no matter how big or small, creates money out of thin air through credit, without the need to collect deposits or follow any reserve requirements. It's all a matter of digital record. And hear me out. Let's say you go into a bank and deposit $10,000, and then John comes in asking for a $5,000 loan. Instead of the bank transferring $5,000 from your account to John's account, this theory states that the bank would just record the $5,000 loan for John without transferring money or checking if the bank has sufficient deposits or even if the reserve requirements are met. And people believe banks can do this digital voodoo money magic for 3 reasons. 1, non-cash transactions account for more than 95% of all transactions conducted in an economy nowadays. 2, banks act as the accountant of record in our financial system, and thus people can't distinguish between credit money, i.e. the money from thin air, and cash money. And 3, banks are exempt from certain regulations that non-bank organizations are required to follow, such as how they categorize client deposits, which makes it easier to do this. But hey, I see how you're looking at me through the screen like I'm some crazy conspiracy theorist. But can we agree on just one thing? You and I, come here. You probably don't really trust the financial system, or at least have some doubts about it, right? Well, you're not alone. trust in the financial services sector declined in 20 out of 27 countries worldwide from 2020 to 2021. Look, what's most shocking to me is that despite the general mistrust in the financial system, you would imagine that there would be countless empirical studies understanding how our banks and the money system works. But despite these long-standing controversies, and despite the three theories existing for centuries, there has never been an empirical study on them until 2014 by this man, Professor Richard Warner, an award-winning economist and the man who exposed the biggest financial lie of our times. In an attempt to see which of these three theories were true, Richard went on a long, grueling journey in search for a bank that would turn that like button into a beautiful black. Go on, give it a tap. But seriously, he was looking for 1, a bank that would be willing to give him a loan, and 2, a bank that would let them see their internal books before and after the loan was processed. He eventually found one, and what he saw was shocking. He discovered that when he took out a loan, the bank didn't transfer money away from an internal or external account. Instead, he found that the bank merely invented the funds by crediting his account with a deposit, even though no such deposit has taken place anywhere. The bank didn't check whether it had the money to lend him in their reserves, nor did they check with the central bank or any banking authorities to create this new amount of money to loan to Richard. They just made it up on the spot, added it to his account, and he was able to spend that money without a single issue. Even the bank director admitted that this happened in a signed letter to Warner, and I quote, "Nor did we undertake any transfers or account bookings in order to finance the credit balance in your account. Therefore, we did not engage in any checks or transactions in order to prove liquidity." Separately, around the same year Richard Warner published his empirical study, the Bank of England openly said that the reality of how money is created today differs from the description found in some economic textbooks. And whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. Now, to be fair, there are some controversies surrounding Richard Warner's empirical study, so it's not 100% settled yet, and it can take years for new academia to reflect any new changes. Separately, economic models and theories, just like the three we talked about, will always be wrong in some way, even if their applications are useful and works, because economics is not like science or math where there's only one right answer. But let's assume this empirical study and the credit creation theory are correct. Then there are 3 world-changing questions and problems that we need to talk about. First, if banks really are creating this money out of thin air, they're essentially taking on zero risk when they loan you the money. So how should interest payments be factored into this? Why should you have to pay extra to borrow money that never existed in the first place? 2, banks have a rigid framework to evaluate whether they should or shouldn't lend you money. For example, if you're working a full-time job in an office, then you're a perfect candidate for a home mortgage. But what if you don't fit into the bank's rigid framework? What if you work an hourly job or something unconventional that the banks don't see as traditional? Then you'll either get pushed towards a really high interest rate loan or flat out get rejected, even if you are financially better off than someone who works in an office, which is troubling, right? Because home ownership is a foundation to establishing solid financial footing in our society. So in a way, banks are actively picking winners and losers in our society. 3, banks are stealing labor from you. You can think of the interest that banks charge as a rental fee for the borrowed money that you have to pay back. And remember, the money that you're borrowing didn't exist before you actually borrowed it, which means you are effectively spending years of labor to cover the extra interest rate payment. Is it fair that you can only get money by performing labor, whereas banks are able to just will it into existence? But as bad as all this sounds, things might actually get worse. There is something coming just a few years away that could change the financial landscape forever. A new technology that can strip away even more power from you and your very own money that you hold. And this thing is called CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. A CBDC is a digital currency similar to Bitcoin and Ether, except for one big difference: control. Because cryptocurrency is generally decentralized, that means people have the freedom to use it how they see fit. They can buy and sell and exchange it for whatever they want. But with a CBDC, this freedom would disappear. If a central bank issues a CBDC, that means the digital currency will be centralized and controlled by your government, meaning they can regulate it however they want. And because it is digital, they can do even more, such as track and see everything you buy, sell, and exchange in real time, and even force you to do things you don't want to do. Okay, let's say the economy was doing poorly, in a recession. No one is spending money. So what the Federal Reserve could theoretically do with the CBDC is impose a negative interest rate in your digital wallet, gradually shrinking your electronic balance, creating an incentive for you to spend and consume more stuff to stir up the economy. Not scary enough? What about an expiration date? Just like with milk, your money can expire if you don't use it. China is currently experimenting with a digital currency called the digital yuan. Check this out. The digital currency can be programmed to have an expiring date, which will give the Chinese central bank a tremendous amount of power. But why would China, or any country for that matter, want to expire their money? It all comes down to economic control. China's goal is to be self-sustainable. They have actively taken measures for years to rely less on foreign countries. Back in 2010, China's exports were 26% of their GDP. Last year, it was only 18%. Being able to control the flow of consumption makes it easier for them to control the demand and supply for the goods they produce internally, and ultimately control over economic growth. And things like negative interest rates and expiration dates for digital currencies are the newest technological weapons to do this. But China isn't the only country developing its own digital currency. Countries around Europe and America have proposed or are actively developing their own too. Just recently, President Biden signed an executive order that would monitor crypto investments much more closely. But inside this executive order, he wrote, "My administration places the highest urgency on research and development efforts into the potential design and deployment options of a United States CBDC." To be fair, there are some benefits to a CBDC. It would cut high transaction costs drastically and may help those who are economically disadvantaged. Because if you didn't know, it's very expensive to be poor in the United States because it gets more difficult to do things like get a credit card to access digital finances, and you're much more likely to get charged exorbitant fees if you have a low account balance. But with a CBDC, this would grant everyone access to digital payments and a portal for basic banking services directly with the federal government. It would also hinder illegal activities that rely on anonymous cash transactions such as drug dealing, money laundering, and terrorism financing by bringing hidden economic activity into the formal economy. But the question for you is this worth the increased scrutiny and potential regulation from the federal government? Comment below. Look, the problem with how money is potentially created today due to the credit creation theory is that it isn't sustainable. According to Richard Warner, other than being a partial intermediary, banks or the financial sector doesn't add any value, and instead, they just make up value. And what's worse, ever since the 1970s, when the gold standard was abolished, meaning the value of the US dollar was only worth what someone else would pay for it, this concept of made-up value skyrocketed out of control. If you actually look at the data, modern-day banking has gotten so good at creating money out of thin air that there simply isn't enough cash in existence to pay off all the debt in existence. The Federal Reserve estimates the M2 money supply, that is all the money that is kept in bank accounts, saving accounts, and in physical cash, is around $21 trillion. The national debt is currently sitting at $30 trillion, which doesn't account for household debt or the debt at the state level. So even if everyone in the United States tried to pay off all their debt tomorrow, there just wouldn't be enough cash in existence to do it. And this doesn't even account for the interest that is accruing from all this debt. But Richard Warner doesn't think it's too late to fix our financial system, and fixing it doesn't involve more centralization like with a CBDC. Richard believes that there is a way to use the power of banks to bolster the economy in unprecedented ways by decentralizing it. And there is one country that Richard believes has figured this all out. In September 1945, after World War II ended, Germany's economy and country collapsed, and the world believed that Germany's future was dark and nearly impossible to recover. Germany's industrial output was down by 33%, housing stock was down by 20%, their currency became worthless, they faced food and goods shortages, and most of the working age men were either killed or disabled. But in 1989, less than 50 years after the end of the war, Germany experienced what many economists and historians call an economic miracle, and quickly became the largest economy in the EU and took a leading position among the world's economic power, even to this day. And Richard Warner believes this miracle all comes back down to this: decentralization. Around 70% of banking in Germany is carried out by around 1,700 local banks, which operate in the transparent interest of the public, and is the reason so many small and medium-sized businesses have been able to succeed in the German economy. He even believes that this is the reason the German economy has been able to recover from recessions so much better than other countries in Europe, like the UK. But Richard isn't the only one who believes decentralization is the future. It was 2008. The world saw one of the greatest financial collapse in our lifetime, all thanks to greedy big banks and financial institutions. And shortly after, the world witnessed in horror as the US government decided to bail out these financial institutions without dishing out any meaningful consequences. It was around this time when a mysterious man named Satoshi Nakamoto emerged from the shadows and changed the entire financial system forever by creating a new form of currency. But Satoshi never imagined a byproduct of his creation, NFTs or non-fungible tokens, could destroy everything he ever built. Click this video to learn the truth about NFTs that no one is telling you.